All right, so today we're diving into something that shapes, well, pretty much everything about our lives: gender. It feels so basic, right? So fundamental. But what if a lot of what we think we know about it is actually kind of made up?
I mean, think about it. Why is blue for boys and pink for girls? Have you ever actually stopped to ask that? Who made that rule? It just feels normal, doesn't it? Obvious even. But is it really? That's the big question we're going to tackle.
So that leads us to this huge question. Is gender something we're just born with? A straight-up biological fact that never changes? Or is it something that we, as a society, kind of build together? We're going to explore this wild idea that maybe, just maybe, a lot of the gender rules we live by aren't nearly as natural as we think. And look, this isn't some brand new idea. A sociologist named Berger actually gave us this incredible framework for understanding how this all works. He shows us how something like gender can start as just an idea and then somehow turn into what feels like a solid, undeniable fact.
So Berger laid out what you could basically call a three-step recipe for making reality. Yeah, you heard that right. His whole point was that we don't just stumble upon the world as it is. Nope. In a lot of ways, we're the ones actively building it every single day, just by interacting with each other.
This whole thing is called the social construction of reality. It's a big phrase, but the idea is simple. Our world is built on things we all kind of agree on. Now, this doesn't mean gravity is fake or that rocks aren't real, of course not. But think about things like money, or marriage, or even gender. A piece of paper is just a piece of paper, right? It only becomes money because we all agree it has value. That's the idea here.
Okay, so how does that happen? How does a simple idea go from being, well, just an idea to a rock-solid fact that everybody just accepts without question? Berger says it happens in 3 key stages, and they all flow right into each other.
All right, first up is externalization. This is where we create stuff, ideas, ways of doing things, norms, just by talking and hanging out. So, picture this. A bunch of people need to cross a snowy field. The first few people trudge through and create a path. Simple enough. But then comes stage 2, objectivation. After a while, that path isn't just a path, it becomes the path. It hardens, it gets established. It looks like it's always been there, a permanent part of the field, totally separate from the people who first made it. And then finally, you get internalization. New people show up, and they're told, hey, that's the path, use it. They don't question why or who made it. They just accept it as the natural, correct way to get across the snow. And boom. Just like that, a simple choice has become an unshakable rule. Okay, so a path in the snow is one thing, but how does this apply to something as huge and personal as gender? Well, it's pretty much the exact same recipe. This 3-step process is how these ideas about masculinity and femininity get so deeply, deeply baked into our culture. That second stage, objectivation, is where things get really interesting. These ideas about gender aren't just floating around. They get built into the very structures of our society. Think about it. Sociologist Ann Oakley found that families start shaping us from the moment we're born. Then you've got the media. Irving Goffman and Laura Mulvey pointed out how ads and movies are just constantly showing us these same gender roles over and over again until they feel totally normal. And R.W. Connell saw it in schools, where boys actually police each other to make sure they're being masculine enough. All these institutions, family, media, school, they're like giant signposts, all pointing to that same established path.
So at the end of the day, all of our individual actions, our so-called gender performances, add up to create these massive cultural expectations. You know that women should be caring or men should be assertive. It all starts with us, but it quickly becomes the script we're all just handed and told to follow.
And that brings us to the final step, internalization, which is maybe the most powerful part of all. We learn these rules so young, and we see them everywhere all the time, that we forget they're even rules. They stop being social expectations and just become the way things are. They feel natural, inevitable, like they're just a part of who we are, deep down. So, you can see how Berger's theory is super helpful, right? It gives us a map for how this all happens. But it's not the complete picture. It's a really empowering idea, for sure, but there's a pretty big piece of the puzzle that's kind of missing. Okay, but first, let's talk about its biggest strength, and it is a huge one. If all these gender roles and the inequalities that often come with them are built by us, that means they're not inevitable. They're not written in our DNA or handed down from the heavens. And that is a revolutionary thought, because if we built it, guess what? We can also
unbuild it. We can change it.
But, like I said, there's a catch. Berger's original theory tells us how reality gets built, but it kind of skates over one absolutely critical question.
And that question is, who gets to build the reality we all have to live in? Who's the architect here? I mean, are we all equally involved in making that path in the snow? Or do some people, some groups, have way more power to draw the map that the rest of us just have to follow? That's the one thing Berger's theory doesn't really dig into enough, the question of power.
And that's really the key difference when you look at other thinkers. Berger was all about the how, the process that we all take part in. But later theorists, especially from feminist and cultural studies, came along and shifted the focus to who. They started asking, who actually benefits from these rules? Who's in charge of the media and the schools that make these ideas feel like facts? They started looking past the process and straight at the power dynamics driving the whole thing.
So you have people like Gay Touchman and Judith Butler, who really built on what Berger started. Touchman looked at the media and came up with this idea of symbolic annihilation. Basically, how women were either ignored or just turned into simple stereotypes. And Judith Butler came along and said, yeah, okay, we perform gender, but it's not like we're on an empty stage choosing any role we want. We're performing within a system that's already rigged with unequal power.
Okay, so we've gone through the theory, the critiques. What's the big takeaway here? What does all this actually mean for you and me, just living our lives?
It means that the social world isn't fixed. The rules aren't set in stone. All these categories we use, all these expectations we feel, they're all just the result of a long, ongoing conversation that we're all a part of. They're built on human agreement, not some law of nature.
And that's really the bottom line. Gender isn't destiny. It's a social product, and it's one that we are all constantly building and rebuilding every single day with every choice we make.
And that leaves us with one last, really big question. If we realize that we are the architects of our own social world, well, that's a huge responsibility, but it's also an incredible opportunity. So if we're the ones who built the reality we have now, what will we choose to build next?